Hey friends, welcome back to this Bible Study with Me edition of Embrace the Question. I hope that you're having a good week. We're in Genesis chapter 19. There are several big events that happen in this chapter. It's a long chapter, so we're not going to get it all in today. We're going to focus on the first half. The rest, which is the story of Lot and his daughters, we're going to tackle that next time, and probably the following chapter as well, chapter 20, because that's a shorter chapter. So I hope you have your Bible. If you are with us for the first time, I invite you to join us on this journey because it has been great. As it turns out, we're going to have 50 plus chapters of Genesis, so 50-ish chapters, but we're going to have, 25 hours of Bible study in Genesis. Now that's awesome to be able to say, hey, I poured 25 hours into Genesis this year. Most people don't get to do that, or most people don't do that. So that is an accomplishment, and I'm very proud of you guys for hanging in there with me. Okay, so let's do this thing. Let's go into Genesis chapter 19. But before we start, I want to read a couple of preliminary passages for you. I want you to see what the early church fathers thought about this whole situation. And let's read it with that in mind. So let's start out in 2 Peter chapter 2. Okay, 2 Peter chapter 2, verse 6. Here we go. If by turning the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah to ashes, he condemned them to extinction, making them an example of what is going to happen to the ungodly. And if he rescued righteous Lot, that's what we want to remember. Righteous Lot. Greatly distressed by the sensual conduct of the wicked, for as that righteous man lived among them day after day, he was tormenting his righteous soul over their lawless deeds that he saw and heard. Then the Lord knows how to rescue the godly from trials and to keep the unrighteous under punishment until the day of judgment. I would say let's finish the sentence, but it keeps going. And especially those who indulge in the lust of defiling passion and despise authority. Mostly what I want us to realize is that Peter considers Lot a righteous man. Okay, I think it's really easy to read through Genesis starting at the point where they had their meeting. Lot and Abraham had their meeting, and Lot took the good land and gave Abraham perhaps what was left, which was not as good looking, and we get this idea early on that Lot's just not such a great guy. Perhaps then we should take more into consideration what the early church fathers thought. So Peter here thinks that this guy was a righteous guy. Let's take another look at one more thing before we get into Genesis 19, and that is in Ezekiel chapter 16. So let's find Ezekiel here, chapter 16, and verse 49. Scroll all the way down to 49. Look at this. Behold, this was the guilt of your sister Sodom. She and her daughters had pride, excess of food, and prosperous ease, but did not aid the poor and needy. They were haughty and did an abomination before me, so I removed them when I saw it. Okay, most people, when you ask, why did God destroy Sodom and Gomorrah, they're going to start talking about sexual sin. And without a doubt, that was part of what their guilt was, right? But that was not the primary offense to God, according to this. According to this, their primary sin was they had wealth and they didn't share it. They had pride and excess of food prosperous ease, and they did not aid the poor and the needy. All right, so now we're ready for Genesis 19. You'll remember in Genesis 18, Abraham had 3 visitors, 2 angels and God himself. These are the 2 angels that we saw in that story. Here we go. The 2 angels came to Sodom in the evening, and Lot was sitting at the gate of Sodom. When Lot saw them, he rose to meet them and bowed himself with his face to the earth and said, "My lords, please turn aside to your servant's house and spend the night and wash your feet. Then you may rise up early and go on your way." And they said, "No, we will spend the night in the town square." Okay, I want to stop here. I want to take this a little bit slower. We've got time because we're not doing the whole chapter. Okay, Lot is sitting at the gates. Many of you know this, but the gates were a place of authority. That's where the elders sat. And sometimes the city judges, the magistrates, also sat at the city gates. If you'll remember the story of Ruth, Boaz had to go to the city gates to finalize the transaction in order to get Ruth to be his wife. Okay? That's where the actual transaction took place. So the gates are places of authority. In Scripture, you and I are also referred to as gates. Why so? Because it's through you and I, as Christ followers, that the authority of God flows. Remember, lift your head, O ye gates. It's talking about you. It's talking about me. We are places of authority with the Spirit of the Lord in us. So gates is an important picture. And here is Lot at the gate. Now we don't know from this whether or not he was actually in one of those prominent places, but we do get another clue here shortly. So we'll bring it back up. The angels show up, and Lot he's portraying some of that famous Middle Eastern hospitality. We see him say, "Come to my house. I'll wash your feet. We'll feed you. We'll take care of you. We'll protect you." Why? He was quick to jump to this because he probably knew, according to Peter, that this is a dangerous city. And you don't want to be out after dark. You don't want to be running around without an escort. It's not a good place. So we're starting to understand some of Peter's commentary on this. And the angels say, "No, we will spend the night in the town square." Or in the literal, they're saying, "We'll just stay in the streets." Of course, the angels aren't afraid, right? They know something that probably Lot doesn't realize yet, and that is they are angels. Okay, let's continue on. But he, Lot, pressed them strongly. So they turned aside to him and entered his house. And he made them a feast and baked unleavened bread, and they ate. Can angels eat? Yes. Yes, they can. Okay? But before they lay down, the men of the city, the men of Sodom, both young and old, all the people to the last man surrounded the house. Now that is an impressive thing. It says all the men. So this is a morally destitute place indeed, right? And they called to Lot, "Where are the men who came to you tonight? Bring them out to us that we may know them." Okay, most of us realize what they're saying there. And in case you don't, what they're saying is, bring them out and we will know you in the biblical sense, meaning we're going to rape them. Okay? And Lot went out to the men at the entrance and shut the door after him to protect his visitors. And he said, "I beg you, my brothers, do not act so wickedly. Behold, I have 2 daughters who have not known any man. Let me bring them out to you and do to them as you may please, or as you please. Only do nothing to these men, for they have come under the shelter of my roof." Okay. Lot gets, again, a huge strike against him on this one. He is sacrificing his daughters to a mob of men in the middle of the night. to protect strangers. That, in our culture, seems about as debased and barbaric as you can get, right? And that culture in that day, the most important thing was to be safe as a visitor in your host's home. So Lot was doing what he thought was of the most priority, the utmost priority, protect his visitors. But there's some other things at play here, because if Lot was a man of prominence in the city, perhaps he thought, or perhaps he knew in his heart, these men aren't going to hurt my daughters. Perhaps that's a thought. Okay, I'm offering that. But we will be able to add a little commentary to this as we go, so let's keep reading. And they said, the mob says, stand back. And they said, this fellow came to sojourn, and he's become the judge. Now we will deal worse with you than with them. Then they pressed hard against the man Lot and drew near to break down the door, or break the door down. So Lot is being called a judge here, which leads me to think that, yeah, perhaps he's sitting in a magistrate position at the gates. It's pretty good proof. And we could come to the understanding, or the presumption at least, that these people didn't like Lot because, one, he was a judge. Two, he was still considered a newcomer, a sojourner. Three, he's righteous. And the unrighteous typically resent the righteous. The unrighteous don't appreciate the righteous. So they're trying to break down his door. Verse 10. But the men reached out their hands and brought Lot into the house with them and shut the door. Who are the men? The angels. And they struck with blindness the men who were at the entrance of the house, both small and great, so that they wore themselves out groping for the door. All right, I read a little bit of commentary on this, and the thought was that perhaps they weren't completely blind, because if you're completely blind, why are you still trying to get in? Why are you still looking for the door? So the thought was that perhaps they were affected in their physical sight, but also maybe a mental blindness, a confusion, to where they could get around and they could search for things in vain, but they weren't completely helpless. That kind of makes more sense to me. All right, verse 12. Then the men said to Lot, have you anyone else here? This is the angels speaking. Do you have anybody else here? Sons-in-law, sons, daughters, or anyone you have in the city. Bring them out of the place. Okay. For we are about to destroy this place, because the outcry against its people has become great before the Lord, and the Lord has sent us to destroy it. Verse 14. So Lot went out and said to his sons-in-law. Okay, let's stop right there. Remember his daughters. They've not known men. They're virgins. But they're betrothed. Okay, where are his sons-in-law during this? They're not in the house because he went out to get them. So where were his sons-in-law? They were outside in the mob, since all the men of the city were in the mob or somewhere close by. So perhaps Lot thought, well, if I send my daughters out, then their husbands-to-be will protect them. Maybe, especially with the impetus put on protecting your visitors. Protect your visitors. So I'll send my daughters out as a sacrifice. Maybe it will temporarily, suffice to quiet this mob, and their husbands-to-be will protect them. Maybe that's what he was thinking. I am really trying to help Lot out here, because remember, Peter thinks he's a righteous man, And Peter says that everything that Lot saw in this city grieved him. That's a head scratcher, isn't it? Why was Lot staying in the city? Why did Lot stay? Why do we do a lot of the things we do? Could be asked as well. Okay, so now the mob is confused. They're stumbling around outside. The angels have said to Lot, hurry up, get your stuff together. Get anybody that you want to save right here, and they have a chance. So he sent out for his son-in-laws. He went out and said to his sons-in-law, who were to marry his daughters, up, get out of this place, for the Lord is about to destroy the city. But he seemed to his sons-in-law to be jesting, so they're not taking him seriously. I'm reminded of Noah. Noah's building a boat. He's imploring people, turn, and they're making fun of him. Same thing. Verse 15. As morning dawned, the angels urged Lot, saying, up, take your wife and your 2 daughters who are here, lest you be swept away in the punishment of the city. But he lingered. He's moving too slowly. So the men seized him and his wife and his 2 daughters by the hand, the Lord being merciful to him. And they brought him out and set him outside the city. There are some things here that we should key in on. And any one of these could be a Bible study lesson for you, especially if you're the one leading it, right? So Lot is being too slow. He's probably trying to find the birth certificates, get the family albums, put everything in a bag, doing what people do when they're having to evacuate quickly. Get what's most important. And the angels seem quite ruthless here. They seize him and his wife and his 2 daughters by the hand. The Lord being merciful to him. So sometimes when we are forced to do something that we're really not wanting to do, we're being rushed, we're being herded, right? And it just seems so unjust, so unfair. Sometimes that's the merciful hand of God. Yeah, that'll teach right there. That'll teach. Okay. And as they brought them out, the angels brought them out, one said, escape for your life. Do not look back or stop anywhere in the valley. Escape to the hills, lest you be swept away. And Lot said to them, oh no, my lords. Behold, your servant has found favor in your sight, and you have shown me great kindness in saving my life. But I cannot escape to the hills, lest the disaster overtake me and I die. I don't know what he was thinking. I don't know if the hills were so far away that he just thought he couldn't make it. Perhaps he didn't feel like a long journey. Maybe he just wasn't physically up for such a trek. But for whatever reason, Lot didn't think he was going to make it before destruction hit the city. He says in verse 20, behold, this city is near enough to flee to, and it is a little one. Let me escape there. Is it not a little one? And my life will be saved. So Lot's saying, there's a little city over here. I can go there. It's not too far. It's just a little city, guys. Don't destroy it too. Isn't that an interesting plea? Don't destroy it. It's just a little city. And he said to them, behold, I grant you this favor also, that I will not overthrow the city of which you have spoken. So the angel says, okay, you go there and I won't destroy it. Now remember, his conversation with God. God, if you find 50 in Sodom, will you spare it? God says, no problem. And Abraham talks him all the way down to, what, 10? If there's 10 in the city, will you not spare it? And God said, I'll spare it. But Abraham went no further. He went no further in his bartering, in his intercession. Now Lot, who is not Abraham, Lot is not the covenant guy here. Abraham is. Lot's just the nephew, okay? And we find out that Lot is being spared because of Abraham, not Lot's righteousness. Okay, that's going to teach too. But Lot is saying, I want to go over there to that little town, which, by the way, is also on the destroy list. The angels were going to destroy it too. And Lot says, if I go there, will you spare it? And the angel says, no problem. Wow. So Lot is interceding as well, howbeit for some personal gain, right? He doesn't want to have to flee to the mountains. He wants a city to live in. However, we find out that he doesn't stay in this city of Zoar, because we're about to find out that it is named Zoar. And the angels decide to spare this little city because Lot wants to flee there. And I find that fascinating. Lot did not do any fancy talking. He just asked the question, if I go there, would you spare that city? And the angel said, no problem. Okay, so escape there quickly, for I can do nothing till you arrive there. Listen to what the angel says. I can't destroy something until you, the righteous Lot, the son of the one my Lord has covenant with, till you're gone. I cannot destroy the righteous with the wicked. I cannot. I'm not permitted to. Therefore the name of the city was called Zoar. That's chapter 22. Now, I do want to come back to this thought, this idea, that being righteous wasn't enough. Being righteous is not enough. You have to have covenant. Okay? Think about that for a moment. You have to have covenant. And we'll find out, we'll have a little color added to that here, I think, shortly, because it's going to mention that again. So let's continue with our story. Verse 23, the sun has risen on the earth, or the sun had risen on the earth when Lot came to Zoar. Then the Lord rained on Sodom and Gomorrah sulfur and fire from the Lord out of heaven. And he overthrew those cities and all the valley and all the inhabitants of the cities and what grew on the ground. Okay, that's an important distinction because they made it. The writer here, Moses, made this distinction that the part of the judgment was on the crops. There was no desire for civilization to be here again. Okay? Such was this judgment. But Lot's wife behind him looked back and she became a pillar of salt. All right, famous flannel board teaching. Here's Lot's wife. She's white. She's a pillar. She shouldn't have turned around. What really happened there? Well, we're guessing. Did she supernaturally turn into salt? Did she somehow figuratively become overtaken and become part of the salty environment? Because she turned around. I'm just spouting off things that I've read in the commentaries, basically, because it is an interesting thing to consider. Why did she turn into salt? Why salt? Why salt? Because salt is that really good thing and that really bad thing, right? You are the salt of the earth. It's a good thing. It adds flavor. It adds preservative. It adds even great things to fuel to fire. Burns hotter if salt is added to it. But in this case, Lot's wife turns into a pillar of it, and that's not good for her. It's in the Dead Sea area, right? It's in a place that is known for its salt. Very, very desolate kind of place. So we find that Lot's wife couldn't let go. She turned back to look at where she came from. When Lot chose the fertile area of Sodom and Gomorrah, he didn't have a wife yet that was mentioned. So we're left with the thought that perhaps Lot moved into the Sodom and Gomorrah area and met a wife. When you take your family, or your family grows up in a place that's morally bankrupt, then they tend to have more obstacles to overcome, right? It's hard to get Egypt out of a person. Say it like that. And Lot's wife had a lot to overcome that she just didn't do. She just didn't get it done. So she looks back, she becomes a pillar of salt. Abraham, verse 27, Abraham went early in the morning to the place where he had stood before the Lord, and he looked down toward Sodom and Gomorrah, and toward all the land of the valley. And he looked, and behold, the smoke of the land went up like the smoke of a furnace. So it was that when God destroyed the cities of the valley, God remembered Abraham and sent Lot out of the midst of the overthrow, when he overthrew the cities in which Lot had lived. Again, the wording here is interesting because it says that God overthrew the cities. I believe that some of the commentaries say that it's written in such a way that it might appear that they were literally turned upside down. These cities were turned upside down, or they sunk down, to imply that perhaps there was an earthquake to go along with the fire from above. So if this were volcanic in nature, that would make sense. Volcanoes have a lot of fire, but they have a lot of seismic activity as well. So could be. Here is where we find out, though, that covenant is everything. God didn't remember Lot. In verse 29, God remembered Abraham and sent Lot out of the midst of the overthrow. So it's the covenant that matters. Sometimes as righteous people, at least the brand of righteous that was categorized in the Old Testament as being righteous, that wasn't enough. Sometimes you could be, as a righteous person, in the wrong place at the wrong time. But covenant comes to the rescue here for Lot, for Abraham, and it always comes to the rescue for us as well. And as we go, we understand that I don't have a covenant with God. I'm in Jesus. Jesus has the covenant with God. So in so doing, that covenant between God the Father and Jesus the Son can't fail, because Jesus can't fail. So what does God do? He puts me into the only safe place he can put me, and that's into Jesus, which is why Jesus says, hey, if I abide in you and you abide in me, it's all covenant speak, right? I will never leave you or forsake you, because I can't. I'm in you. You're in me. I can't separate that. We are a new creature. That's what was going on here. And I find that quite fascinating. But now Lot has moved to the burbs, right? He's in Zoar, a small city, and we, I guess, are to assume that that's not good enough, because in this next section, he's not there anymore. He's already moved out. And that's where we're going to start on the next lesson next week. So I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you wrote some notes down, because there's a lot of places, a lot of things there to take notes on. Bring it up in your Bible study. Bring it up in your Sunday school class. Hey, I learned this on Bible study with me online. Check this out. If you have questions, feel free to ask. And I hope you all have a blessed week. Peace.